Hello guys, it's Peter from PS Sound, and now this is 7.3 of the sound quality in-car series. If you haven't seen the previous ones, then please go to the channel, click on playlists, and then go to sound quality in-car, and then you will see everything, all that you've missed probably. So this is the crazy part when we are going to talk about the extreme speaker installation. I will try to add pictures while I'm talking, so it won't be as boring just looking at me for like 20 minutes, because this is probably going to be a long video. You know, in the 7.1 part, in the first part of the speaker installation, we were talking about OEM options and then few tricks and tips regarding that. In 7.2 we had OEM Plus with like pillar builds for the mids and things like that we were covering. And now this part is gonna be the crazy one. So, Jesus, where shall I start? That's the thing. I never really plan these videos. It just comes. I always approach any system, especially if it's truly about going mental, that anything I install, it has to be rock solid. That's rule number one. So any vibration or resonance is out of the question, which is very difficult to achieve in a car. You will always have little rattles here and there. But if you really want to hear the sound just from the speaker and nothing else, then you have to make sure that everything is mounted proper concrete solidly. Of course, it becomes more difficult when it comes to mid-bass and subwoofer installation, because the lower you go in the frequency range, the more vibration and resonance you have to face and fight against. And in most cars, probably, I try to talk about mid-bass installation first, because mid-bass installation is the most difficult part, and that breaks or makes a system. If I always say the comparison that it's a bit like, you know, having a great band. Everyone plays well, but if the drummer is shit, it doesn't matter how great the double bass or the bass player is, or the saxophone player or singer. If the drummer is shit, you know, it all falls apart. There's nothing to pull the system together, and that's what the mid bass does. So why is it difficult to install mid bass drivers? First of all, because we sit inside of a car in a tiny little box, we will have different room modes. If you don't know what that is, then you have to do a bit of Google search regarding that. But basically, it's easy to imagine, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, that depending on where you sit and where the speaker is located, you will have different response coming from the drivers, which is affected by the room that you sit in. So what things can affect the response? Obviously, you have direct sound coming from the driver, and then you have reflected sound, and then depending where you are in the frequency range, you will have cancellations. You will have peaks at other places. What you want to achieve to get as even response coming from left and right as possible. Mid-bass is the driver which plays the range, let's say in between 50-60 hertz up to, let's say, 300-400 hertz in a three-way front end, where the wavelength has the length that kind of doesn't want to work out well in the size of the car. You will have huge cancellations in most cars at around 80-90 hertz on driver's side, as well as 120 up to 160 and so on from passenger side at like 300-ish. It's all over the place. And yes, we can talk about locating mid-bass drivers at different locations other than the door, like in the kicks, on the dash, under the seat. They all have their odds and cons, and I'm gonna try to cover that quick. But as I said, what you want to achieve is to mount the mid-bass rock solid. I mentioned many times that I just hate door applications, for the simple fact that no matter how much work you put into the door, you can put a lot of detailing onto the outer skin, the inner skin, door card and everything. You can mount that driver on the door on a aluminium ring or steel ring, anything, but there will still be things rattling. I had my Honda at the beginning where I had the mid bass just located on spacers, plywood spacers, and then I had to learn the lesson that, you know, the further you space that mid bass driver away from the inner skin, the more you create a color around the driver, the more you color the sound. So you want easy airflow behind the driver, you want to create a chamfer. I did that, and when I compared that from one side to the other, that was massive. Like, wow, you know, how the hell can it affect it that much? Then you learn that, you know, I have to pay attention to that. I was talking about that in one of the videos I shared when I did the Insignia with the C-pillar install. Check that out, when I showed that how important it is even for a mid-range to let the driver breathe. It's the same with the mid-bass. So I did that. Okay, I learned the lesson. All right, then I don't do more spaces and crazy things even with the mid-bass. So I built a massive buffle all along the door. It was like probably like 10 kilo, around 20 pound heavy buffle with 5mm steel, double 18mm plywood, all bonded together, glued together. It was a rock solid structure, bolted onto the door. It was even isolated from the inner skin. There was closed air foam in between the buffle and the door, and then it was bolted on. And I was expecting magic. On the top of this, of course, the door was treated everywhere. Like, you know, outer skin had like probably like 40 pounds of sound deadening on the door, and there were still things rattling. Of course, it helped, but no, it wasn't as good as building kicks, let's say, with rock solid mounting. And in the kicks, what's possible to rattle? Think about it. If the firewall or the kicks have anything that would move, then you have a flimsy car. Then you are sitting in the wrong car. Sell it, buy anything else. But you know, the firewall is always the most rigid part of the car. And you know, if you can locate the driver there, then it's going to be pretty easy to mount it rock solid, and there's nothing going to be around it close by that could rattle. Inner door, the window mechanism, anything, any soft parts can come alive, and if you feel any vibration on the door, that's lost energy. Then the whole door cut radiates sound. You may not hear it, but it definitely affects the performance, and not everything is going to come from that single point from the cone, but from the whole door. And then what do you really hear? Do you really only hear the sound coming from the driver? No. So I went through phases, and then I had to find that, okay, if I can't do kicks, what can I do? Then I built enclosures for my car as well, and that was major. When I built the first enclosure, I even shared a video, I don't know whether here in YouTube as well, probably, like the first impression of this door enclosure build, and it was mind-blowing. I was like, you know, why did I wait that long to do it? So yes, you do an enclosure for, let's say, a mid-bass on the door. At least you get rid of all the vibrations. You have a really high chance that you will get rid of all the vibrations. If you have anything rattling, that would be at such a high level that by that time the mid-range and everything else in the system is so loud that you won't really hear the rattles, and you will only really hear the clear sound coming from the driver. It's still not the best option to have the mid-bass on the door, because you will still find the location-related phase issues. What can you do with it? If you're great with tuning, you can go far, but you can't get rid of everything, every single cancellation in the car, to be fair. Even if you locate the driver in the kicks, which normally works out better, you have less problems to deal with, and it's easier to match left and right response in the kicks with the mid-bass up to 300 Hertz. Above that, it's crazy. So for two-way, forget it. But kicks definitely do the magic, and what you have to look for also when you build an enclosure or you put the mid-bass in the kicks is the airspace for the driver. It's very important to make sure that mid-bass driver has enough airspace behind it. I think I was talking about it in 7.1 to, you know, highlight a little bit about the DLAN small parameters when it comes to QTS, VES, FS, and all those things. So you can't just chuck any driver into any application. But as I said, if it's a rock solid mounting, you will definitely have better results than even if you know, even with cheap speakers, you can do well if the mounting is rock solid. Friend of mine, an installer in UK, Lee at Platinum in Car, did something really crazy in a Golf. Now I add these pictures again, where you can see that he cut the wheel arches out completely, and he built kind of tunnel, a completely free tunnel for the driver to breathe to the outside. And then you might think, Jesus Christ, how can this car drive? Well, they made protection in front of the driver, so no moisture can go through and affect the membrane, but the airflow is absolutely fine. So that's one crazy way to do kicks. I've done enclosures in kicks before, or like in the latest Insignia, I did this kick and as well as the floor space all built together to get enough airspace for the driver. So there are different options to do mid-bass well. Then you have under seat location. The same thing applies for any under seat location, just like what I mentioned in 7.1, I think, where you can do well with under seat locations, but you can't really play above 150. That's pretty much where it caps off. Then you need large format mid-range somewhere up front to integrate the mid-bass under the seat. Once you do it well, you can easily tune the system in a way that you wouldn't even notice that the driver is underneath you, other than if you have tactile resonance coming through the seat and you can physically feel it under your bottom. That's something to not impossible to get rid of, but it definitely is better than a rattling door application. I did that enclosure in the Kia in December under the seat. That worked out superbly with the 4-inch drivers on the dash. They disappeared completely, and they worked really well in between 50 up to 160. And left and right was so easy to match that I hardly needed any EQ bands. On some mid-bass drivers, I need 15-20 bands easily for each driver. In that car, I think one side had like 5, the other side had like 8 bands of EQ. That was it, and it was beautiful. That was probably one of my favorite builds in the way that it was so easy to achieve great results in that car, compared to some other cars where you have to spend 15-20 days installing only speakers. And then you were like, Jesus Christ. In that car, it was done in like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days for all the 6 speakers up front. So yeah, car selection is important as well. Mid-bass, we covered enclosures, kicks, under seats, roughly now. Then we get to mid-range. Mid-range, to me, that's the most important part of the system. It's not the most difficult to install like the mid-bass, but it's the most important part of the system because you want that mid-range to play as wide range as possible, or at least to cover the vocal range. Just like in my car, I am using large format mid-range drivers, although it was a long process to get there, and possibly I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't use anything larger than 4 or maximum 5-inch driver up on the dash. Because you just can't play anywhere lower than 150 or 120 with any driver up there as a mid-range. You can play lower, but then there has to be a dedicated front sub, let's say, on the top of the dash, which will struggle with output because the headroom doesn't really work out well on the top of the dash either. But for a mid-range, you won't get the right response because under 200 hertz, you have to kind of slightly raise the response. It has to slightly rise all the way down exponentially towards 20 hertz. So if you keep it linear all the way down to 20 hertz, you would lag bass, and that's the problem with the mid-range up on the dash as well. Any mid-range 3, 4, 5-inch driver can play down to 200, 150. Then it's getting difficult because it has to start to rise a bit, and then under 150 it has to rise even a bit more, whereas you would see a response that would decline and roll off. So how do you fight that? Do you push crazy level of EQ into it, it's not going to help. That driver is already struggling there and is distorting at that low end. Then you push more EQ into it, no, it's not gonna work out really well. So forget locating any larger driver up on the dash larger than 5-inch, unless you are really silly like me and then you want 7-8-inch mid-range. And then yeah, it has few benefits, like you can go absolutely crazy loud without any distortion, but then how do you locate such a big driver on the dash, right? That's not simple either. Again, mounting rigidity is super important, whether you make enclosures or you just mount it on the dash. Like in the Insignia, I didn't build enclosures and the drivers were just breathing literally straight underneath the dash, free air. And there's big advantage of using especially mid-range drivers in free air, because you just get that finest free unaffected sound that normally you don't really get with little pods or tiny little boxes. I explained that in one of the videos as well. When you know, try to put a mid-range into a tiny little box, it will sound really suffocated, and then it's not going to work out really well, not in my eyes. Yeah, sometimes you that's the only thing you can do, because it's simple. Put a 2-3-inch driver in a tiny little pod, you can easily bolt it on the pillar, you can even aim it easily and then find the right aiming, you know. Yes, but if you go for the ultimate, you want to make sure that that mid-range driver has enough airspace behind it. So dropping it into the dash can work really well. You can play around with the aiming. It changes slightly depending on how high you want to play that mid-range without too many problems in the frequency range. Like in the Insignia, you have to read about comb filtering and what that is, how it affects the response, because obviously you get sound coming from the driver and then you have response coming from the reflection of the windscreen as well. If you find a good location and good aiming, then you can play well up to like 1.5-2K. Above that, it will start to get quite crazy. Sometimes even from 1K it starts to get crazy. Then it's just down to how good you are with tuning, measuring and EQing. Then you can get away and it can work well. Or, you know, you can locate mids on the A-pillar or in the sails. The funny thing is, when people ask me, you know, where would you put it? What's the best location? You always have to work with the car, what the car gives to you. In some cars, you just can't do A-pillars because the A-pillars are this thin and you have no chance. Then in some other cars, you have the space, then yeah, go for it. Or sail panel. Well, if you do sail panel, one thing is going to be great, stage width is going to be great. Although to me, distance to stage is going to be really close, and you will feel like the bend is like in your face, right in front of you. Like if you were sitting in the first row looking up at them. It's a bit like when you go to a cinema. Do you want to sit in the first row and look up like that? It doesn't feel natural. To me, I'd rather choose a narrower stage which has better distance to it. So anything from like bottom of the A-pillar, mid-range location or dash location for the mid-range, you will experience that your distance to the stage increases slightly. Yes, stage will be narrower, but hey ho. Does it have to be super wide? Then if you want a really wide stage, then you can play with rear fill, differential rear fill, and then that can pull the stage wider. Possibly not for competition. It's not easy to play with rear fill for pure competition, left and right stereo front end, but there are ways around expanding your stage width as well. But yeah, if let's say you do sail panel for the mid-range, then what you want to look out for is that that driver can work in that tiny little airspace. Because I see some people even locating 5-inch drivers on the sail panel. I'm like, why? You know, even just mounting the driver there is difficult. Some people just literally build onto the trim panel and they clip it in with the factory clips. Is that solid? You know, in some cars, it happened to me before that I touched it. I wasn't going crazy to pull it, you know, rip it off, but I could feel that it was coming loose, and I'm like, Jesus, you know, if you can do this, well, first of all, it's not safe, and then if that happens, then it's gonna have vibrations as well. So again, rigid mounting, right? and then airspace for that driver. If you have a small little driver in the sales 2-3 inch which is happy with that tiny little airspace, fine, why not? It's an easy way to do well. And then we get to the tweeter installation. Well, but there are many theories, and not just theories, but ways of people achieving different results with tweeter mounting in different locations, especially in relation to the mid-range. Some people say that they just love the fact that when the tweeter is on the same vertical axis with the mid-range, it's easier to integrate it and make it seamless, as well as make imaging better, because then there won't be timing differences between left and right. As the pairs, the mid-range and the tweeter pairs, you won't have any issues with that. Yeah, ideally I wouldn't want to locate tweeters too far away from mid-range, because if the difference in height is too much, I heard cars where the mid-range was like at the bottom of the dash, like at the vents, and the tweeters were up, not kind of like halfway the pillars. You will hear the difference in stage height. Like the mid-range will be lower and then the highs will be higher. The stage will split. I can't live with that. So there's a limitation how far you can space them in terms of height, but then also in terms of width. If you have mid-range really narrow on the dash, then you put the tweeters into the sails, then people say, wow, at least it helps with expanding the stage width. But then you will have different focus points. If you do time alignment well, your center will be at a different place with the mids, and it will also be at a different place with the tweeters. How do you line them up correctly if you want the ultimate result? You know, plus, you know, some notes, let's say from passenger side, will come from further in on the dashboard, and then some, you know, parts of the instrument, the higher frequency range parts, will come from quite wide, so they will split. Again, that's very difficult to align properly without any issues. I'm sure some people can do it, but I wouldn't suggest it. But probably the tweeter is the easiest thing to play with. All you want to really focus on is that the tweeter has the right response from left and right, and then aiming becomes more and more important the further up you go in the range. If you aim those tweeters at each other, then on driver's side that tweeter will be at like 780 degree off. It won't play anything above 810 kilohertz, whereas from the passenger side it will still be at like 40-50 degree. It will have a better chance to play further up, so you will have to fight against unbalanced response quite much, and you will never be able to get the driver's side back. You can EQ the shit out of the top and boost it, but then your passenger will die because he will get all that boosted top end. So yeah, it's a, you know, you need a bit of experience to find the best aiming with the tweeters, because of course you have to think about side window reflections as well. You don't want to put that tweeter bang on axis straight onto your ears, especially on driver's side, because then that tweeter will be so close, dispersing everything onto the side window, that will fuck up even more. But as I said, tweeter aiming and then location is probably the easiest thing. Then again, okay, subwoofers. Jesus, that could be a different part. But if you want to go for the ultimate result and you want front sub experience, then I would probably think about how can I put a larger mid bass up front, so I don't have to play the sub that high anywhere I can locate it. You know, if the sub is in the trunk, if you have to play it up to like 80 hertz, yeah, good luck integrating it, especially when you have big cancellation problems at like 60-65 hertz in most cars from the sub, from the back of the trunk. So yeah, ideally you want mid-bass drivers up front that can play as low as possible without distortion. Then I can suggest to, you know, select a larger driver, an 8-inch or a 10-inch if you have huge American car and you have a lot of space in the kicks. Then go for a large mid-bass. I've seen some people putting in 12. Someone even put in a 15-inch driver in the kicks. I wish I could do that. I would love that. You wouldn't even need a subwoofer in the car anymore. Or if you have a chance, then locate a sub somewhere up front, underneath the dash, underneath the glove box. Footwell is difficult in most cars because you don't have enough leg space, or you limit the leg space, which makes your passenger uncomfortable. But again, you want to make sure that the sub is mounted rock solid. It's not going to rattle anything. Yeah, what subwoofer? I would possibly leave that for this topic, because that could be a completely different topic, talking about what subwoofers, what to look out for. So Jesus Christ, I could carry on talking about this shit for days, but probably I have to pull a line at this point. So overall, hopefully from these 3 parts now, from 7.1, 7.2, and now this part, you have a better idea about how to achieve great results with your speakers. But as I say, installation is that's the key. Even like today, someone was, kicking me about, Pete, what mid-bass driver shall I buy? I have this, I had that, and none of those drivers played well. He couldn't keep up with the mids and the tweeters, and he didn't have that kick and anything. And I'm like, show me pictures of your install. Oh, door replication with a shitty rattling French car. What do you expect? I can't recommend anything to you. So I recommended the guy, all right then, focus on the install, build an enclosure for the door. Oh, what driver shall I select for that? No, forget it. Don't focus on the speaker. Build an enclosure, make it as big as possible, because it can never be too big. Build it, measure it. Once you know the size, then you can find a driver, you can model it, and then you can come back to me if you want my opinion, and then I can suggest a driver that would work in that space. If you have a 4-liter tiny little enclosure, then you will struggle with most of the 6.5s, because they require at least 6, 7, 8 liters minimum. If you have 10, 12 liters, it will be easier to find drivers. If you have 15, 20 liters, yeah, easy peasy. You can even find an 8-inch for that airspace. But don't forget it. Forget about, what speakers should I use. Forget it. Always focus on the installation if you want the best results. Because even, as I said earlier, really cheap speakers will do really well in a well-built car, right? So focus on that. I don't know. Why did I get so passionate about it at the end? I don't know. It just happens with me. So yeah, probably I'll put a line here. Next video is going to be with an installer. We actually have the footage from the UK finals when we met up. We had an interview type video talking about the importance of installation overall. So that will be interesting. And then hopefully part 9 is going to be about tuning. Woohoo! Everyone is waiting for that, I'm sure. And I will try to cover as much as possible, without going too crazy and without giving everything away, because as I say, I can't give everything away when it comes to tuning, because I'm still an active competitor and I have a big team as well, and there's a reason why we do well. So yeah, but I will definitely help you guys with tuning, because that's the second most important thing other than installation. Then after that you can worry about speaker selection, amplifier selection, guys, hopefully you like this video. Feel free to comment. As always, I really appreciate when actually you help each other out, because I don't necessarily have the time to answer everyone, but really just go crazy and answer each other, just like on any other Facebook groups. And feel free to share it. If you're not subscribed yet, then please do so, because that definitely helps me. Some people actually wonder how the hell I only have 5.3k subscribers, considering what content I create, because there are not many people talking about these little things. To be fair, I don't really stress about it. Yes, it would be nice to have 200,000 followers, but I'd rather have you 5,000 guys following me than having masses and then having people who are not genuinely followers or like paid subscribers. All the subscribers I have are all genuine. I'm sure guys, once you get a notification, you get excited. Whoa, another video from Peter, and it's great when people comment that, whoa, I'm the first. That's brilliant. I love that. Well, probably those guys never watched the video till the end. They start to type in straight away, which is funny. So yeah, I got it here, guys. At least now we have time in this lockdown craziness. Hopefully you are all well, and please isolate yourself and look after your family in these times. I don't want to really talk too much about it, but I really hope that all of you are doing well and we can get through this period as quick as possible. Till then, you know, listen to music, plan your car audio, home audio, whatever it is, and then hopefully we can talk very soon. Take care.